If you pull off this jump, you're going to be the talk of the lunchroom. All you have to do is leap off this bridge and onto a moving train passing under you. It doesn't look that fast. What could go wrong? As it turns out, a lot. A surprising number of people die from doing risky activities, and an even more surprising number die from regular activities that turn out to be deadly. What do they all have in common? These are some more of the dumbest ways to die. Number 10. Eating way too much. If you had to come up with a sport that could only exist today, it's probably competitive eating. Yes, we have enough food that we can watch gustatory gladiators go head-to-head, like when hot dog eating champs Joey Chestnut and Takeru Kobayashi faced off on Netflix, with Chestnut eating a staggering 83 hot dogs in one sitting. But it takes a lot more than gluttony to win these competitions. It takes practice and strategy, as the human body is not meant to eat that much food in one go. And that's something a lot of people have found out the hard way. At least 10 people have died during eating competitions, with most of them being amateurs who didn't know how to pace themselves and wound up tragically choking to death. In some cases, it was the fault of the food. Marshmallows are one of the last foods that should be used in a speed eating competition. Same for hot dogs, which can easily get stuck if not chewed properly. But other culprits have included tacos, pancakes, pie, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. And as for the man who died in 2012 during a roach and worm eating competition, well, those roach legs weren't meant to go down there. Yum. But speed eating is far from the only way you could die from eating. One man didn't even get to enjoy his burger. Number 9. Too much DIY. Barry Griffiths was an independent man, and the 57-year-old Welshman wasn't willing to let health setbacks stop him. He'd recently suffered a stroke, which limited mobility in his arm, and he also suffered from heart disease. But he didn't want help or company, living by himself and preparing his own food. One day he set out to make himself some burgers from frozen patties, but the burgers were stuck together. No worries, he pulled out a knife and began prying them apart one by one. The exact circumstances of what came next would never be known, because Mr. Griffiths wasn't found until a welfare check was called into his country home, at which point officers found him lying dead with a wound to his abdomen. At some point, the knife likely slipped and stabbed him, at which point, rather than seeking medical help, he simply got into bed and tried to sleep it off, but never woke up. Coroners could not confirm whether the cause of death was the heart disease or the stab wound, but the latter could not have helped. But it's not just eating animals that could have unfortunate consequences. Not even man's best friend is innocent. Number 8. That's not on the dog. 30-year-old Joseph Smith was a good old boy in Sumner County, Kansas, and he was looking forward to a day of hunting. He and his friend had everything they needed: their hunting rifles, a truck, and his friend's loyal German Shepherd. They loaded the dog and the guns into the back seat and set out for the woods to bag some deer. And somewhere along the way, the dog got excited and stepped on the trigger, causing it to go off and shoot Smith directly in the back, killing him. Not exactly a man's best friend action. But dog lovers across the country jumped to the defense of the dog. After all, dogs don't know what a gun is, and it had no bad intentions, and the authorities agreed. They immediately pointed out that putting a dog and a loaded weapon in the same area is a recipe for disaster. While no charges were filed in the case, it gained national attention, and it served as a key point of evidence for those who believe man's best friend belongs in the front seat. It's rarely the animal's fault, but sometimes you have to wonder, what did they expect? Number 7. A bird-brained decision. Marvin Hayos was a 77-year-old Florida man, and he certainly lived up to the reputation. The eccentric farm owner loved to collect exotic animals, and he had recently obtained a prized specimen for his collection, a cassowary. These flightless oceanic birds have a reputation for being aggressive and territorial. In fact, many people have said they're the closest living thing to a velociraptor today, thanks to their sharp talons and confrontational behavior. What could go wrong? For Mr. Hayos, a lot. The large bird was none too pleased to find itself in captivity, and when Mr. Hayos was in the bird's enclosure, he apparently fell, and the cassowary wasted no time. It set upon its new owner, kicking him repeatedly until it punctured a key artery with its sharp 3-clawed foot. Marvin Hayos bled out and was pronounced dead on the scene, and authorities warned that the cassowary was the most dangerous bird in the world before auctioning off this particular murder bird to a new owner. Let's hope no sequel is forthcoming. Sports always have a risk to them, but one sport is turning out to be surprisingly deadly. Number 6. The cutting edge. Hockey is one of the most dangerous sports, which makes sense when you think about it. It's a sport played on ice where armored guys collide into each other while holding big sticks, and they try to send a hard, flat puck flying into the net at top speed. And that's before you get into all the fights. But there's another element that's only getting attention now. They're doing it all with razor blades attached to their boots. And that proved to be the undoing of Adam Johnson, a pro hockey player who was playing in England in 2023 when he was the victim of a freak accident. While Johnson was playing against the Sheffield Steelers, he fell on the ice, and the Steelers player Matt Petgrave kicked up toward him, the blade of his skate cutting Johnson's neck. Johnson collapsed and bled out on the ice, and a manslaughter arrest would later be made, something very rare in an on-field sports incident. But this wasn't the only case like this. A year earlier, a teenage boy in Connecticut would die in a similar incident in a high school hockey game, with this one being ruled a complete accident. Maybe ice blade sports have just a certain level of lethal risk. Teenage rebellion can have deadly consequences, even for royals. Number 5. Fire in the hole. Archduchess Matilda Marie Adelgunda Alexandria of Austria, that's a mouthful, seemed to live a charmed life. The third child of Archduke Albert of Vienna and Princess Hildegard of Bavaria. She grew up in the mid-19th century and was expected to be key to her family's plan to grow its influence. She was designated to marry Prince Umberto of Savoy, the crown prince of Italy, to boost relations between the two. And her father wanted everything to be perfect. That meant that his daughter must give off the impression of a proper young lady. And one act of rebellion would spell the princess's doom. On the 6th of June, 1867, Archduchess Matilda was planning to attend a performance at the theater. Wearing a gauze dress that she'd picked out, she stepped outside to smoke, something that was strictly forbidden by her father. She heard her father approach, impulsively hid the cigarette behind her dress, and the dress went up like a bonfire. She was covered with burns and died soon after from her injuries, putting an end not just to her life, but to the country's hopes of improved relations with Italy for now. Number 4. The Old Man is Snoring. The Old Man is Snoring is one of those nursery rhymes that's a little too morbid, a song about an old man who hits his head and dies in his sleep. But it's not artistic license either. It is believed that falling out of bed is one of the most surprisingly common causes of injury and death, with up to 20,000 people suffering injuries each year and several hundred dying in the United States alone. So what about our beds is so deadly? In a word, nothing. When we're likely to fall out of bed, we've either just woken up or we're still asleep tossing and turning in a dream. That impacts our response time, which can be deadly. After all, you're not falling from a high distance, but a few feet can be all that matters if you hit the wrong point. A head injury can not only be fatal, but hard to detect. That's what happened to famous funny man Bob Saget, who hit his head in the shower, went to sleep and never woke up. Likewise, falling the wrong way and breaking a neck is possible if you go head first. So maybe the best approach is to invest in a king-size bed. This next entry is the definition of making a bad choice in the heat of the moment. Number 3. Out of the frying pan, into the fire. Brazil is one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, mostly due to the Amazon rainforest. Unfortunately, not all the residents are always friendly, as one 30-year-old man in Brasilândia de Minas in the south of the country found out. He was fishing with some friends at a lake when they were set upon by a swarm of bees. Being stung dozens of times, they jumped into the lake to escape the angry bugs, only to make a horrifying discovery. They were not alone in the lake, and the other residents were hungry. Yes, the lake was filled with some of South America's most feared residents, piranhas. While the carnivorous fish aren't the razor-filled monsters movies like to portray them as, they are attracted to blood and open wounds, and dozens of bee stings would qualify. While 2 of the men managed to swim away safely, one was likely overcome by a combination of the pain and the water and became a fish buffet. He was found 4 meters from shore, partially eaten by the piranha. Looks like the fish won this round. Maybe being a spectator is safer, but not always. Number 2. Worst game ever. Sporting events are always a big draw, as anyone who's ever tried to get tickets to the Super Bowl knows. That was already the case in 1900, when Stanford and UC Berkeley were about to play their annual Thanksgiving game. The game attracted thousands of people, many of whom didn't want to pay the hefty $1 admission fee, so some got a bright idea to climb up on the roof of a nearby glass-blowing factory to get a view from there. Soon, people were crowded on the roof. The game kicked off around 2:30, and it's believed over 500 people gathered on the roof. The police tried to restore order but failed, and after 20 minutes the roof gave way, sending the massive crowd tumbling into a furnace below. Only one furnace was active that day, but it was filled with molten glass, and up to 100 people fell on top of it, being horribly burned. Thankfully, the furnace held and didn't pour the molten glass onto the victims, but fuel pipes were broken, spraying hot oil and setting fires. In total, 23 people were killed and over 100 were injured. It remains the worst disaster in U.S. sporting event history. Oh, and the game went on. Stanford won. But that was a horrible one-time event. This final cause keeps on happening. Number 1. Surf's Up. Remember when we asked what's the worst thing that could happen to those who go subway surfing? Turns out the answer is a lot. Subway surfing is a reckless, illegal, and popular stunt pulled off by teenagers and graffiti artists in major cities, where they try to jump onto a moving train. Why? Some want to show off for their friends, some want to pull off a stunt for social media, and others want to put a graffiti tag on a hard-to-reach area. What they all have in common is that they are taking their lives in their hands, because trains are not meant to be ridden on the outside. It's not exactly known how many people have died train surfing over the years, but the Wikipedia page has hundreds listed. The most common cause of death is falling off of the train, but other victims have hit their heads on overpasses, gotten caught between cars, or hit electrified rails. The good news is, this one is fairly easy to avoid. All we have to do is not jump on a moving train. Want to know some bizarre ways everyone almost died? Check out freaky experiments that almost destroyed the world, or watch this video instead.